Hey guys, I am back with a new Diablo 3 Barbarian guide. Last time we looked at Hammer the Ancients. This time we're going to look at something that's actually somewhat similar, but does have a pretty different playstyle. I'll get to why it's both similar and different in a minute here. But it's pretty cool. Hammer the Ancients requires you to really get up in the middle of crowds and, pretty much you have to be melee range all the time. Today we're going to look at Seismic Slam, which allows you to be at range while still putting out a lot of damage. So there are advantages to each build. Since we are looking at the Seismic Slam build today, I'll talk about what makes it unique and what makes it strong. Because you can kite much more effectively, your toughness effectively is a lot higher, since you just should be taking a lot less damage. You don't have to stand in the middle of arcane missiles or arcane sentries rather, or poison pools or whatever. You have a lot more freedom to move around and kite as you see fit. So that is one of the advantages of the build. So let's dive right into the skills and take a look at what we're doing here. We are going to be using Focus and Restraint, of course. So we do need both a Fury Generator and Spender. Our Generator is going to be Weapon Throw, because again, this is a build that's looking to play from at range. So we have a couple options for Weapon Throw. The one that I played around with a bit was Throwing Hammer, just for the chance to stun. Was not bad. However, this build does not generate Fury as easily as the Seismic, or the Hammer of the Ancients build, rather, because the Hammer of the Ancients build has an item that essentially lets you gain Fury by using it. Here we're actually going to be spending our Fury, so what we're going to go with is Balanced Weapon. We're not taking advantage of the fire damage, which is a bit unfortunate, but it does give more Fury generation every time we use it, which does end up being relevant for a few reasons. So that's what we're going to go with here. Seismic Slam, obviously, is the main part of the build. Permafrost is 100% the rune of choice. I don't see a reason to use any of the other ones. I've played around with a few. Permafrost definitely seems like the best one. Stagger lets us reduce the cost, not a big deal. Shatterground is cool in that, A, if we wanted to go fire damage, we could, and B, it does have a knockup, which is nice for some crowd control. We could go with strong arm bracers, either on the item or cubed, really, if we wanted to. But Permafrost, surprisingly here, the cold skills usually have a lower damage percent than the others. However, you see normally it's 620. The fire, which is usually the highest damage, is 735. The cold is actually 755. Not a huge difference. But it also does afford us crowd control, because it's going to chill enemies hit by 60% for 1 second. And since we're constantly hitting enemies, they're constantly going to be chilled, they're going to be slowed. So it's actually a big deal. We still get crowd control and the highest damage possible, so we're going to go with that Permafrost rune. Call the Ancients together as one, so that we take less damage. I will get into actually the runes on the gear, because it is relevant. Wrath of the Berserker Insanity, standard stuff here. That's just the highest damage increase we can possibly get. And again, we'll get to how we're going to be able to use this effectively with the gear. Battle Rage Bloodshed, again, pretty standard. We get just a 10% damage buff, crit chance buff, and whenever we crit, we do get extra damage in an area, which is nice. Warcry, obviously, again, I will say, like I did in the last video, there are a few options here. I'm going with Impunity, just because my resistances are a bit low. You can go with Veteran's Warning, definitely a reasonable choice. It's something I actually want to play around with a little bit more, but it does just give you dodge chance, which is definitely not bad. Invigorate, Charge, nothing. Hardened Wrath, if you're good on resistances but you need armor, you can go that way. For our passes, we're going with Berserker Rage. This is one of the reasons why we want the Balanced Weapon rune on Weapon Throw. It's so we do get that increased Fury generation, because this is a big damage spike for us, but we need to be near maximum Fury, so we want to get there as quickly as possible. Weapon Throw is not dealing a ton of damage. Most of our damage is coming from Seismic Slam, so we want to use Weapon Throw as infrequently as possible, so we want to just make sure that when we use it, we're getting as much Fury out of it as possible. Rampage is just good for going through the rifts. Every time you kill something, your strength goes up by 1%, stacks up to 25 times, big damage increase when we get it. Brawler, I've been playing around with. You might actually want to try doing something else, just because if you are kiting effectively, you might not have 3 enemies within 12 yards of you. I just have a tendency of, even with ranged builds, of getting a little too close. That's just on me, so I'm keeping this on. But you definitely can play around with some other stuff. The last spot, I would usually recommend some sort of defensive passive. Relentless actually does kind of count as that because when you're below 35% life, you're able to spam stuff a lot more, life free spend is doubled, and damage taken reduced by 50%. Kind of a big deal. Otherwise, you have a few options. You can go with Superstition is definitely an option. Tough as Nails is an option. So really kind of whatever you want to do. If you're not at all worried about it, you just want more damage, Ruthless is always an option as well. The one thing I would not suggest is Boon of Volcathos. While I will say that it's a little bit harder to keep up permanent Wrath of the Berserker with this build than with the Hammer of the Ancients, you're just wasting a passive slot here. Even if it's down for a few seconds, what you're giving up by having this as one of your passives instead of pretty much anything else is just not worth it, in my opinion. So, there's that. Let's take a look at the gear. As before, we are going to be using 6 pieces of the Immortal King set, everything except the weapon. Again, it's a big deal because in the last patch, the 6-set bonus, Wrath of the Berserker and Call the Ancients are active. Instead of getting, before it was a 100% increased damage buff, now it's 250%. It is huge. It has opened up a lot of build paths. Really nice. Everything else is more or less the same as we did before. It's going to be Focus and Restraint. I will say, actually, since the last video, I do actually have now Focus and Restraint with Strength, Crit Damage, Crit Chance, and Socket. So that's nice, I will say. Fury of the Ancients is still going to be our shoulders. That's why we're getting the Ancients Fury rune from the shoulders, which is why we can go with together as one on the actual rune. Just a good amulet, Strength, Crit Damage, Crit Chance, Socket. We'll go over the gems in a moment. You can get Seismic Slam damage on both your helm and your boots, which is nice. The weapon is going to be Fury of the Vanished Peak. It does come with Seismic Slam damage on it. It also reduces the Fury cost by a significant amount. It's going to be between 40 to 50%. Mine rolled a bit low on that, but anyway, that does help quite a bit. And the bracers are going to be bracers of destruction. For that unique effect, Seismic Slam deals between 300 to 400% increased damage to the first 5 enemies it hits. That is a huge damage buff, extremely important. I once tried doing this build without these bracers just for fun. It was nowhere near as effective. These things are huge. So again, you will get cold damage where you can. You get Seismic Slam damage where you can. As far as the gems go, again, it's Focus and Restraint. The gems are going to be Bane of the Trapped. Obviously, enemies are constantly going to be under control of pairing effects, either because you're close to them or because we are using the cold rune on the Seismic Slam, so that even if you're not within range to get the aura that's going to proc Bane of the Trapped, your Seismic Slam will still do it, so it's really big. Other than that, Esoteric Alteration, again, just getting that damage reduction is really helpful. I've been using Ice Blink. Actually, I haven't ranked it up completely yet. It's only ranked 43 right now. But it's really good because, again, we talked about the crowd control on the cold rune for Seismic Slam. So now when they're chilled by 60% for 1 second, you're now going to slow them an additional, however much, depends how much you've ranked up your gem. Here it's 22.2%. Plus, since they are going to be chilled, you do get 10% increased crit chance. That's just a nice little damage buff. I would definitely say that Bane of the Trapped and Esoteric Alteration are musts. Here, you do have options. I've been using Ice Blink for now because I like it. Taiguk is also an option since you are constantly spending Fury to get the increased damage and armor buff as well, so that's definitely an option for you too. As far as Paragon Point distribution, just go to movement speed until you have 25%. I usually don't like putting much in Vitality at all, usually 0. However, I was, this actually for Cold Over for my other build, I was super squishy, so I put a little bit in Vit, but really you just want to dump everything in Strength. For here, crit chance and crit damage are going to come first, attack speed is going to come after that, cooldown reduction will be last. In the defense tree, resist all and armor will come first, then life percentage and life regen is nice if you have it, not a big deal if you don't. Utility tree, area damage is actually really good with this build, works well. Life on hit's going to work well for you. Resource cost reduction, obviously gold find is last. As far as the cube, I've tried a couple different things. I'm using the furnace with almost every build just because I love it. Just that extra 50% damage against elites is too good to pass up. Unity, obviously you want to use Focus and Restraint, so you're going to cube Unity so that with your follower, with the Unity and a Immortal Relic, it's 50% less damage to you. I'm using Tasker and Theo right now just because I want my Ancients to be hitting as much as possible just for the Fury generation. That's really all I care about. There are other options, of course. I will say that in my last video for Hammer of the Ancients, I was using Taskers because those are the only thing I had cubed. I did switch to Strong Arm Bracers in that build. Much better. Do recommend it, but not as important for this build since we're not knocking people up nearly as often. So I do like the Taskers here just to try to get the Fury generation from the Ancients as quickly as I can. And that is it. That is the build. I will be showing it in action in the second video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the build guide. I will link to where you can find the second video where we will go ahead and run through a Greater Rift to show you that this build is no joke, can handle Greater Rift 50 plus with ease. Check that out.